Thank you to Charlene and Greg for being our featured musicians today. Aren't they fun? The perfect relationship. I know that's why you all are here today. You want to know what I'm going to say. So let me ask you this. By a show of hands, how many people here know that all of their relationships are perfect? Good. We have a few. And we have some people that are still looking, right? So let me share this story with you. This lady who lived in Michigan went with her family on vacation to New England. And the little town they went to was a town that Paul Newman happens to frequent with his family. So one Sunday morning, she was there. She got up and went for a brisk 5-mile walk. She decided during her walk that she was going to treat herself to a double-dip chocolate ice cream cone. So when she finished her walk, she got in the car, she drove to the center of the village where the bakery/ice cream store was. She walked in. There was only one other patron there. It was Paul Newman. He was sitting at the counter having a coffee and donut. She looked at him. He looked at her. And as she kind of stared into those big blue eyes, her heart started to skip a few beats. Her breathing got a little faster. And she said, "Pull yourself together. You are a 45-year-old woman. You're happily married. You have 3 kids. You're not some teenager. Come on." So she took a deep breath and walked on in the store to the counter. She placed her order. She got her ice cream cone, and she got her change. She turned around and walked out of the store being very proud that she did not look at Paul Newman again. She got to the car. She realized that she had her ice cream cone, she had her change in one hand and no ice cream cone. And she said, "Well, where's my ice cream cone?" So she turned around and walked back into the store, thinking that she's going to see the guy behind the counter standing there holding her ice cream, or it's going to be in the little tray on the counter. And as she walked through the door, she sees no ice cream cone. Where is it? So she's looking around and thinking, what's going on? As she looks at Paul Newman, he smiles this big smile and says, "It's in your purse." Even when we think we have the perfect relationship in our life, some other things can trip us up, right? Yes, it can happen. So how would you feel if I told you every relationship in your life is perfect? Some of you might tell me, "Well, you're crazy." Or that I'm really out of touch with people's lives. But I want to offer to you that as spiritual beings, every relationship we have is perfect for our spiritual unfoldment. As we evolve as spiritual beings here, having our human experience, we get to learn from each one of the relationships. Well, you did change it. How good. So, even those relationships that push all of your buttons, that's a perfect relationship for your spiritual unfoldment. And what would you think would need to change in order for that to be the perfect relationship? Do you think it's the other person that needs to change? Yes, some of you do. Do you think it's yourself that needs to change? How about the whole situation? Have you ever done one of those transplants where you move to somewhere else? And guess who followed you? Yourself, right? So it's amazing. But if you can imagine that every relationship can help you, you also get to realize that we can't control other people. We can't control what they do or what they say, how they act. But what we can control is our response to it. So how are we going to respond to other people? Even the ones that push our buttons. It's our choice. And if you're like me, you were probably asleep for many years. And so when somebody pushed our buttons, we pushed back. We had our response, and we acted just like that. Or we numbed out, or we did something to ignore the situation. So the fight or flight situation came up. But we can consciously choose to make a different decision on how we're going to react to people. And it all becomes evident in how we view different people in the world. All people in the world, really. Do we see people as our teachers? Because we really are teachers for one another. And do we recognize that? Or do we ignore that fact? It's all where our consciousness is. How do we view people? How do we think about life and the experiences that come to us? Is all whatever our consciousness holds. Are we looking for things to work out and be good? Or are we looking for things to be against us? For years, I believed that the universe was against me. And it was a huge shift in my consciousness to realize that Spirit is always there supporting me. He's always got my back. And I can learn from every experience that I have. Let me tell you about Nana Viri. Nana Viri is a Hawaiian woman. She came to the United States to study with Ernest Holmes. She went to LA. Now this wasn't just a weekend workshop or a one-week workshop. She studied with Ernest Holmes for 2 years. 2 years. And at the end, toward the end of this 2-year period, she was in a class with Ernest. And Ernest happened to walk over to the window that was there and look out. And then he turned to the class and he said, "Come, look out the window and see what you see. Tell me what it is that you see." And the class got up and they walked and they looked out the window. He said, "What do you see?" "Well, just people walking up and down the streets. Traffic, cars, buses." And Nana Viri said, "I don't see anything unusual." And Ernest Holmes turned around and said in his loving manner, "How long have you been studying with me?" And they said, 2 years. He said, "You haven't learned a thing, have you?" Well, they all kind of went back to their seats. He said, "I've been trying to teach you something, and you haven't learned it." He walked back over to the window and looked out, and he said, "Come, look out the window again, and tell me what you see." And as they all stood there looking out the window, this whole group of people came walking down the sidewalk. Nobody in the class said a word. And Ernest said, "Ah, see? God on every one of those faces." How do we view people? Do we see the divine in everyone? Or do we ignore that and think, "You're different from me. I don't understand you, so I'm not going to listen to you. My mama told me not to trust people like you," whatever message we had. Or do we see God, that divine, in each person, on each face, and recognize that we can learn from everybody? When we get to that point in our lives, then every relationship is the perfect relationship. Because we can step back and say, what is my child trying to teach me here? What lesson can I learn from my parents? What is my coworker here to teach me? Because I know they're going to teach me something. Will I be open to hearing that? Will I be open to the teaching? Nana Veary, when she had this experience with Ernest Holmes, said, "My grandmother was a Hawaiian healer. She used to say, 'I'm not feeding strangers, I'm entertaining gods.' And she said, metaphysics was right here in front of my face all the time, and I never realized it." Nana went on to write the book, Change We Must, because of her experience with Ernest Holmes and embracing this philosophy. So do you view people, the ones you know and the ones you don't know, as teachers, as the divine? It's your choice. What's in your consciousness? And what will you hold for others? In the Science of Mind textbook, Ernest says, if one sees only unloveliness in others, it is because unloveliness is a strong element in himself. The light he throws onto others is generated from his own soul, and he sees them as he chooses to see them. Another way of saying that is that what we have inside us is reflected in the outside. If we're seeing people that are not being lovely, the unloveliness, then what is it in us that's not being lovely? If we're seeing hatred and anger, what part of us embraces hatred and anger? And when we look within, then we can change our consciousness to see something different on the outside. This quote from Ernest Holmes is in the chapter on mental equivalence. And mental equivalent is a thought that we hold in our mind, what we expect to see in the outside, what we're expecting out of life. And so when we're clear, when we have a clear mental equivalent of what we want in our relationships, then that can come into being. We can manifest that, meaning we can demonstrate it, we can have it show up in our life when we have that clear mental picture. How many of us say, oh, I just want a good relationship with my children. I want to be at peace. But we don't spend any time thinking about what that would look like, what we would have to do, the give and the take that would be there. So we have to work on our consciousness so that we have the mental equivalent that we need. Page 298 of the Science of Mind textbook. Ernest Holmes says, "It is the law that the man who sees what he wants to see, regardless of what appears, will someday experience in the outer what he has faithfully seen in the inner." That means that when we don't judge by appearance, have you heard that phrase before? Don't judge by appearances. No matter what it is that's going on, it might look like a crisis that's happening, but when we can hold that clear mental picture, the mental equivalent that life is good, things will work out, there's a lesson in all of this for me to learn, then we're going to experience in the outer what it is that we're seeing in the inner. So if we're seeing peace, if we're seeing the perfect relationship, if we're seeing that person that loves us unconditionally, if we picture that in our mind and hold that, regardless of what's showing up out here, it will come to pass. It will come into our lives. So the perfect relationship, we need to have that clear mental picture, our mental equivalent of what that relationship looks like. Whether it's with your children, with a coworker, with a life partner. All of these relationships can be perfect when we allow them to be. Now, I am not so head in the clouds that I don't realize all relationships go through seasons. So we have the sunny, bright season, and we love those, don't we? And then we have the not so sunny, not so bright season. So all relationships go through cycles, just like cycles in nature. So don't give up when the cycle is on the downside, because something new is being birthed. When you hold on to that relationship, that mental equivalent of what you want for your relationship, it will change as you hold tight to that. As you think about it, feel it, taste it, smell it, know that it is yours and that this is just what you want. For some of you, you might say, well, I'm not in love with him anymore, or I'm not in love with her anymore. So I'd like to offer to you a spiritual practice. The spiritual practice is to pretend that you love him. For 1 full week, 7 days, without stopping, you pretend that you love that person. When you pass them at the dinner table, you brush their shoulder. When you're talking with them, you put your hand on their arm. Feeling will follow action. Behavior will follow the feelings that we have. And so when we create it with our behavior, then the feelings come. So we pretend for 1 full week that we really are in love with this person, that they are the greatest person there is. And we show that and we demonstrate it through everything we do. Some of you are probably sitting there saying, well, I have tried and you don't realize how hard this is. Try again for 1 full week. If it doesn't work after that, then it's not going to work. So sometimes our consciousness tells us we need to move on and not keep beating ourselves up. But if we can do that spiritual practice of at least pretending for a full week, you might be amazed at what might return to that relationship. Now, the same thing will work with a coworker, with friendships, but you don't do the touching part. But if you pretend with that coworker that you love them, that they have the best ideas, that they are a good source and resource for you, and you pretend that and live that for 1 full week, you'll be surprised at how things change in your life. Some of you, I know, are looking to attract the perfect relationship. You've talked to me about that. Several of you. So make sure that you have a clear mental picture of what it is that you want in that relationship. Now, I've had several people, friends of mine, that have worked on this, and so one particular friend had a whole list of things. Here's all the physical qualities that they wanted in their partner. After a few years and a little spiritual unfoldment, he changed it to, here's some physical qualities, but here's the spiritual qualities I want in a person. He had lost his partner 14 years ago. For many, many, many years, he was grieving the loss of this relationship. And there were a number of people that said, get over it. Move on. It's been 3 years. It's been 5 years. It's been 7 years. You need to move on with your life. I can't tell someone how long their grief needs to last. That's an individual thing. But I can tell you that this particular friend of mine got to a point where he wanted to attract his right partner, the perfect partner for him. And so one of the things he did, besides making this list and including the spiritual qualities, he also looked around his home to see, is there room for somebody else here? And he realized that there was no room. He had a very small 1-bedroom condo. His clothes filled up all the closet. He usually stood at the kitchen counter to eat his meals. There was not room for somebody else in this place. But in his wisdom, he began to develop a mental equivalent, a picture in his mind of how he could move from that place into somewhere with this perfect partner. He wasn't stuck that I have to live here. And that was a huge thing for him. And he has attracted the perfect partner. And guess what? That partner had bought his parents' house 2 years ago because his mother had died. He bought the house, and now his father is in Alzheimer's care. And so he's living in this house by himself. So they can live there together and have plenty of room. And it's the perfect relationship. Spiritually, they really click. Physically, they click. They are wonderful people that play off one another and see the world as being able to accomplish anything. So the perfect relationship can be there. We have to make room for that. I've shared this story with you before about not Mary Baker Eddy, it's Emma Curtis Hopkins. Thank you. And how she has counseled people that if you're trying to attract a partner, you make sure that you set an extra place at the dinner table. You move your clothes halfway out of the closet so you create room for their clothes. You look around your life and you have room for their furniture to come in. So those kinds of things make an opening, a physical opening for that perfect relationship to happen. Maybe the perfect relationship you're trying to work with is with your children or your grandchildren. So maybe it is that you need to create a playroom. You need to have some toys there that they would enjoy. Maybe it's not about just being the adult, but it's about opening yourself to something different. Don't let anyone else tell you that you can't accomplish what it is you want. If it's the perfect relationship, then you can accomplish it. Think it, change your consciousness, move it into everything clear about what you want in that relationship. Look at your physical surroundings and change them. Don't let anybody say, don't you think you're a little too old for that? You know, you're a little set in your ways. Who do you think's going to go along with you? Because that perfect relationship is there, waiting to be revealed. And sometimes we let people tell us things, and we believe what they tell us, and it limits our lives. So my final story here is not really about relationships, but yet it is. There was a man that lived beside the road. Oh, look. Okay, there he is. He lived beside the road and he sold hot dogs. He was hard of hearing, so he didn't listen to the radio. He had some trouble with his eyes, so he didn't read the newspaper or watch TV. But he was happy when he was selling hot dogs. He created a sign to go beside the road, telling how good his hot dogs were. And then he would go and he would stand beside the road, and he would yell to people as they passed by, "Hey, do you want to buy one of my hot dogs?" And people would stop. They would buy his hot dogs. In fact, he had so much business that he needed to up his order of hot dogs and his order of buns. He ended up having to get a bigger station to sell from and cook from because he was selling so many hot dogs. But he loved selling hot dogs, and people enjoyed buying his hot dogs. One day, his son came home from college. And his son said, "Dad, what are you doing? Don't you realize we're in the middle of a bad recession? People don't have money for anything. The economy is going down. People have lost their jobs. There's nothing here that is going to really flourish." And the dad thought, well, my son has been to college. He reads the newspapers. He listens to the radio and watches TV, so he must know what's going on. So he cut back his hot dog order. He didn't expect people to buy them because they were in the middle of a big recession. He stopped standing by the road saying, "Do you want to buy my hot dogs?" He took down his sign because he knew nobody would come and buy hot dogs. And almost overnight, his business went to nothing. And then he turned to his son and he said, "Son, you're right. We are in the middle of a big recession. Are you going to let other people tell you what life is about? Tell you that?" That's right. Amen. Don't listen to them when they do. Allow yourself to open to the fullness of your life, because you are an individual. You are an expression of God, and made in the likeness and image of God means that your nature is the same nature as God. That means that God is abundant, and so your life is abundant. No matter what you want, what you can think of, as long as it's not hurting someone else, you can have it. So think it, dream it. Charlene was singing about dreaming and the dreams we have. Do we dream about our lives, about the perfect relationships that we want? Because that helps us open ourselves to it. It opens our minds to receive it, and it opens our hearts to believe it. So that's my message for you today, is to know that whatever you want, you can achieve when you hold the mental relationship, that mental equivalent for whatever it is that you're looking for. And I know that there are probably a few of you that will say the perfect relationship is when you're loved, even when you have pillow hair, even when you have morning breath, when you wake up and you have a little dried drool, you get dressed and your clothes don't really match. No matter what you do, you're loved. And every time you come home, you're greeted warmly. And then you know that perfect relationship is with your dog. But you can create that perfect relationship with another human as well. With your coworkers, with your children, with your spouse, with your soon-to-be spouse that's going to be demonstrated shortly. Believe it, know it, and claim it. Let us pray. I know that God is all there is. And in recognizing that I am made in the likeness and image of God, it means that my nature is that nature of creation, that nature of love, joy, peace, beauty, wisdom, life, and power. And I speak my word for each person here, that we move into those new relationships that are perfect right here in this day. We accept ourselves for who we are, and we accept all that life has for us. I know that for those that are looking for that perfect partner, it is manifested now. That mental image is clear. We do our working consciousness, and we claim the declaration of what is ours to receive. I know it. I know it is here. I declare it and I claim it for each one of us. I release my word into the universe that always says yes, yes. So be careful what I say to it. And together we say, and so it is.